Hi and welcome. I'm Sigrid Rousing. I'm the editor of Granta. Welcome to this webinar, which is the launch for and reading from this issue of Granta, Second Nature. Now, I'm really here only to introduce Isabel Tree, who is the guest editor for this issue. And you will know her from her wonderful book, Wilding. She's also written several other books. And when I asked her to do this, Wilding hadn't been published yet. And it, of course, took off in a really unexpected way, and with it, the whole rewilding movement. So it caught a moment in time, and we are so pleased and thrilled to have this issue of Granta. With that, I'm just going to hand over to Issy and mute myself. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's amazing to be launching this issue now. When Sigrid first asked me to guest edit this issue, I was so honored, but also incredibly nervous, because it's sort of like being asked to look after someone's baby. And I hope I haven't traumatized it and I can hand it back to her in good heart. I'm also in awe of the team at Granta. How they put together a production like this every 3 months is just astonishing, but it's been nothing but fun working with them. Amazing. What's incredible, I think, about doing a virtual launch like this, of course, is that anyone from across the planet can join. And so that's what's really special, I think, about tonight, is that our contributors are from all over the globe. I think, we've represented all 7 continents, including Antarctica, thanks to Rebecca Priestley, who's in New Zealand. But we're also joined by Charlie Massey in Australia, from Dino in Kenya, all over the place. And at the end, hopefully, if the technology holds up, we'll get Sheila Watt-Cloutier in the Canadian Arctic. And we've got everyone else in between. So it's amazing to see your faces. This has been a project that's been sort of 2 years in the making. So it's lovely. Some of you I have never actually seen before. We've just spoken on email and on the phone. So thank you so much for joining us. I think nature writing at the moment is really on a roll. It's on a high. And I think that is largely because of the environmental crisis we're facing, obviously. At moments of crisis, I think there is a tendency for us to seek solace in nature. And that's been so since the ancient Greeks, the Romantics. And at the moment, I think there is a plethora of really rather astonishing books out there about how writers have found solace in nature, in wilderness, connecting with wild creatures. And it's taken them from a place of despair to a place of hope and reconciliation. And I think nature as healer is obviously crucial, and it's very well expressed in many of the stories in this issue. But nature, I think, now needs writers that can do more than that. We need writers who really understand natural processes, who can communicate the science to us, who can explain the solutions and express our relationship with nature in different ways, so that we can change our mindset in order to face the crisis head on. And I think it's only by facing what is happening in the world head on that we can absolve ourselves of a lot of the eco-anxiety I think most people are feeling at the moment. It's learning how powerful nature is, and how the solutions to all the crises that are facing us now lie within nature. And it's for that reason, really, that this deeper understanding of nature is at the heart of this issue. And I particularly wanted to include Indigenous voices, Indigenous testimonies in this, because often we assume that what is happening at the moment, the environmental crisis, is caused by human beings. And of course it is, but not by all human beings. There are many cultures out there who have been living for millennia in a deeper understanding, a deeper relationship with nature. And we have a lot to learn from them. And in a sense, that message is one of hope. That's not to say that we can be complacent. A lot of the pieces in this issue are very hard hitting. But I think what is really interesting is the power of what these contributors have to say and how it can change our mindset and make us think differently about nature and hopefully galvanize us to change and for the future. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this evening, who also kicks off the issue itself, Professor Callum Roberts. I had the great honor of being sharing a platform with him in a recent webinar, such as life these days, run by the Blue Marine Foundation called Rewilding the Sea. And one of Callum's books that was really extraordinary, I think, and has changed the way I think, certainly, is his Unnatural History of the Sea. But for Granta, he's written a very powerful piece called Shifting Baselines, about his experiences diving in the Maldives over many years. So Callum, can I hand over to you to read from your piece, Shifting Baselines?
Thanks very much, Izzy. And I'm not actually going to talk directly about the Maldives in the piece from this article that I've chosen. These are extraordinary times. The Renaissance heralded in a resurgence of art, literature, and technology, expressions of the period's renewed curiosity about how the world worked and our place in the universe. Not even the greatest minds of the day, however, predicted that within a few centuries, we would transition from being at the mercy of nature to reshaping it. That headlong growth in understanding and influence, that fevered rebirth of culture between the Middle Ages and modern times, is itself a wonder of nature, but it far outstrips growth in our common sense. We know what we are doing to the world. We know how to stop the harm, but again and again, we fall short when it comes to action. Like a teenager, our capacity for calamity has grown faster than our self-restraint, a mismatch that leaves us dangerously exposed. The question of the age is whether we can adapt from fulfilling our selfish interests to fulfilling the self-interest of humanity before it is too late. If we let the growing flood of human impact run its course, nature's beauty and abundance will be pruned so savagely that there will be only remnants left. They will hint at past majesty as a marble torso or shattered face pulled from the earth lets us glimpse the nobility of ancient Greece. Those of us who document nature's struggle as the boot of human progress presses ever harder upon the earth, look on with feelings of helplessness as the world did when the Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas or when ISIS sacked Palmyra. Each forest cleared is another assault, every coral bleaching a silent tragedy. If humanity were to feel the cumulative burden of loss and damage over millennia, it would already be unbearable. But shifting baselines have a protective influence. The patch of bluebell woodland hemmed in by housing can bring as much pleasure as the heavy timbered wildwood that was once there, perhaps more. Young Singaporeans grow up surrounded by skyscrapers and hanging gardens, and many prefer them to the green hell of jungle they have replaced. For those who have seen pages torn from the book of their experience or badly overprinted with vulgar development, the story is jarring and incomplete. But for those new to the scene, it's a different tale. You cannot regret the loss of something you never knew existed. But shifting baselines while soothing the sting of loss do not fully protect us from the consequences of today's recklessness. We know what we have done. Unlike the dinosaurs whose demise was no fault of ours, we rue the loss of the dodo or great auk or Atlantic grey whale because we killed them all. I do get around to optimism by the end of the article.
Callum, thank you so much. One of the things that really struck me when I was reading your piece when you delivered it was how nature writing now really is as much about what the writer is not seeing as what they're seeing. So it's anyway, incredibly powerful piece. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Charlie Massey is in Australia, joining us at the crack of dawn. So hats off to him. Amazing His brilliant book, The Call of the Reed Warbler, very much mirrors our own experience here at NEP, the sort of epiphany we experienced as farmers when we suddenly wised up to what we were doing, the damage we were doing to our environment. It's really about the scales falling from your eyes, I suppose. I wanted to mention that while we were putting this issue together, it was uncanny how many of the contributors were being assailed by these incredible extreme weather events. Charlie, I know, has been through several very extreme droughts on his farm in Eastern Australia, including those horrific fires that we all read about and saw on the TV. But it's against this backdrop that Charlie is really at the forefront of this incredible revolution in changing agriculture, which is full of hope. He's literally a game changer. So I'd love you to hear from Charlie reading from his essay for us, The Ant, the Ard, the Ant, and the Anthropocene.
Thanks very much, Izzy. I have edited this to fit the 3 minutes, and if I drop out with our bad connection, you'll know the pigeons have hit the headwinds. I find it increasingly difficult to grasp the enormity and challenge of these times. When in doubt or turmoil, I walk our farm. Recently, I set out to take a mob of sheep down a laneway to our wool shed. Attracted by a splash of green on a hillside, I climbed a fence to examine a clump of ferns protruding from the crevice of a granite rock. At the base of the rock, a lone bull ant spied me as he went about his business. Around 2.5 centimetres long, this fearless ant, unfazed by my size, reared up, exposing his sharp pincers and a row of teeth. We know now that the bull ant is a Mesozoic creature. He belongs to the most ancient of all ant genuses, his ancestors tracing back to early Cretaceous times, some 112 million years ago in Gondwana, Brazil. But these little guys are not primitive creatures. Their compound eyes enable acute colour vision. And they also possess sophisticated broad-spectrum antimicrobial glandular secretions. Such complex attributes do not evolve in moments. It made me think of the 5th and last great extinction event on Earth, which occurred at the end of the Cretaceous epoch, some 65 million years ago, when a massive bolide collided with Earth. Luckily, the bull ant's ancestors must have been deep underground, and this happenstance saved them from the massive impact and its deadly effects. A global extinction event, however, was not total. Ironically for Australia, this event marked the phoenix-like rise of a distinct Australian land flora, fauna, and associated co-evolved ecosystems. Within 5 to 10 million years, this life had radiated and diversified, and included in this cohort were the ancestors of the feisty bull ant. Our Earth is now experiencing its 6th great extinction event. Millions of species are rapidly dying out due to human agency. There is a high chance we ourselves could be collateral damage. Our inertia in the face of the Anthropocene brings to mind the fabled Icarus. We believe we are immune from natural forces, including an ever hotter sun. At this time, I'm putting my money on the bull ant as the most likely to survive the next great Earth systems challenge. By contrast, we humans appear maladapted to extended life on this planet as we continue to exterminate the very ecosystems that sustain us. But we still have a fighting chance. There are cracks in the dominant destructive pattern of our presence here on Earth. Perhaps the COVID-19 crisis will trigger a more sustainable economy and way of living. And in pockets of the globe, down quiet rural roads, along urban footpaths and in backyards, farmers and city folk alike are finding ways to become nurturers and enablers of nature and its self-organising systems. By transforming what we think of as civilised agriculture, as first furrowed by the yard, and the yard was the first primitive plough, through to a new form of regenerative agriculture, we may find a pathway to sustained life that would complete a 10,000-year cycle of redemption from Ard to absolution.
Charlie, thank you so much. I wanted to mention also that Charlie organised for us and helped put together a wonderful companion piece, really, from an interview with his great friend Rod Mason, who's an Aboriginal leader and who was also very instrumental, I think, in Charlie's own sort of mind shift. And I think it's an illustration of how important it is to have this sort of conduit between different ways of thinking. And Rod Mason's piece is really astonishing, very, very moving. Thank you so much, Charlie. The underground world of soil has been neglected for decades by science. Ever since Darwin's wonderful work on earthworms, it seems we've completely forgotten about the amazing universe beneath our feet. And Merlin Sheldrake's incredible book, which was published this year, Entangled Life, delves into that extraordinary new universe that we're just beginning to understand. For Granta, Merlin has shared with us some photographs, some images of this incredible mycorrhizae that he was exploring in Panama, images that have never really been seen before, thanks to new technology. So I would love Merlin to now show us his images and talk us through his photo essay.
Thanks, Izzy. So I thought I'd actually just read a short section of my introduction to these images, and then show you a video rather than the images, because the images can be seen in the issue, but the video can't. So in the rainforests of Central America lives a small gentian flower, Voria tenella. Their flowers are a vivid blue and their stalks pale white. These ghost plants have no leaves, nor any trace of green. In the place of branching exploratory root systems, they have clusters of fleshy fingers that sit like small fists in the shallow soil. With no leaves and no green pigment, Voria plants are unable to eat light and carbon dioxide in the process of photosynthesis. Their stubby rootlets are ill-suited to absorb water or nutrients from the soil. How then can Voria survive? A few years ago, I traveled to Panama to study the symbiotic relationships that form between plants and the fungi that live in their roots, known as mycorrhizal fungi. More than 90% of terrestrial plants depend on these partnerships. They're a more fundamental part of planthood than flowers, fruit, leaves, wood, or roots, and lie at the base of the food chains that sustain nearly all terrestrial life. Fine threads of tubular fungal cells, known as mycelium, emanate from plant roots into the surrounding soil. These cells can link different plants in shared networks that have now come to be known as the Wood Wide Web. This is how Voria are able to make a living. Through shared fungal networks, nutrients and energy-containing sugars pass into Voria from neighboring plants. Mycorrhizal associations are so prolific that between 1/3 and 1/2 of the living mass of soils is made up of mycorrhizal fungi. Their mycelium is a living seam that helps to hold the soil together. Globally, the total length of mycorrhizal mycelium in the top 10 centimeters of soil is around half the width of our galaxy. In 1845, Alexander von Humboldt described the living whole of the natural world using the metaphor of a net-like entangled fabric. Mycorrhizal fungi make the net and fabric real. So now I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see how this works. Now, if you can't see a blue structure, then maybe someone could let me know. And so this is taken using a laser, all these photos and this video is taken using a laser scanning microscope, which allows you to take slices of, to take repeated slices of a sample. And then render them in 3 dimensions. And so this allows you to explore a 3-dimensional rendering of the root. And because the lasers detect different wavelengths of light, the plant channel and the fungal channel can be collected separately. So you can actually turn down the plant to reveal the fungus living within the root. And that's what you're going to see here. The plant tissue is shown in blue and the fungal tissue is shown in red. And you can see that the fungal tissue is restricted to certain parts of the root. It's really an organ. The fungi form a kind of organ of the plant's body. And you can think of the plant as an organ of the fungus's body. They're both a kind of prostheses to each other. I'd always wanted to travel inside a root. When I was in Panama, I had no idea at the time that this was possible. And so these root excursions still really excite me. Great. Thank you.
It's amazing, absolutely sort of mind-altering stuff. I think it's just for fun, if anyone has not seen it yet, Merlin's got this wonderful little video of fungi devouring his book, which I love too. But those were incredible, wonderful, otherworldly images. Thank you so much, Merlin. Judy Schwartz is really an extraordinary environmental journalist. She can get her head around the most complicated science and make it palatable and digestible for the ordinary layman like me. Amazing. Her books, Cows Save the Planet and Water in Plain Sight, are books that really change the way you look at the world. Her latest book, Reindeer Chronicles, is also wonderful, and like the others, it's about solutions. It's about how nature can fix the mess we've got into on the planet. So I'd love Judy to read from her piece for us about water.
Thank you so much. So the piece is called Water is Never Lonely. The first thing I notice about the cloud forest is its lovely, gentle sound. I walk along a path narrowed by trees and moss-covered rock and hear the light whisper of water, faint but constant. It is a soothing sound, but rather than white noise, I say it's more like silver or crystal, such is its brightness and fragility. Indeed, this high montane forest preserve has a crystal-like name, Joya del Hielo, which roughly translates to jewel of ice. Ice because the temperature is always cool. Here in central Mexico's eastern Sierra Madre Mountains, the mist and the high altitude guard the chill. At least they do for the time being. Alas, nearby logging and land clearances making way for farms and pastures are altering the humidity up in the hills. Now I am skipping. The abundance of life in the cloud forest is stunning. Everywhere you look, life is dripping, climbing, crawling, dangling, hiding, sprouting from, nesting on, nestled in. Those are 500 to 600-year-old cedars, Roberto, my guide, says. I don't know why they spared them. He notes that the previous owner was known to log with impunity. Some 200 meters past the cedars, we reach an area where Roberto has identified 3 previously unknown species of magnolia, 2 of which have been found only in this forest. He calls magnolia living fossils, since they are considered Earth's first flowering plants. This section of the cloud forest, at 2,000 meters above sea level, is a nursery for rare magnolia trees. Now that they are known to be here and are protected from chainsaws and browsing cattle, The magnolia population is rebounding. When they bloom, the fragrance suffuses the whole forest, Roberto says. Here's a young one. There is hope for the species. When you look closely, nothing here is alone.
Wonderful, Judy, thank you. Adam Weymouth's book, Kings of the Yukon, is an astonishing story of his journey down the Yukon River, paddling 2,000 miles. It's the largest salmon run in the world. And he describes along the route the relationship of salmon with indigenous peoples, with the cultures along that route that they have literally spawned. For Granta, he's written for us in a similar vein, thankfully not having to go to such Herculean tasks to do his research. But this time he's brought it home and he's talking about salmon and the relationship with people in the British Isles. Adam, will you read from Survivors for us? Is Adam there?
There we go. I'm there now. I've got to unmute myself. We there? So this section's taken from time that I spent with Nigel Mott on the River Severn. Nigel fished using baskets called putchers, which was a technique that was only found on the Severn. And he was one of the last commercial fishermen of wild salmon in England before he was made to stop by the Environment Agency in 2010. So now he just goes down to the Severn as a hobby. Nigel pulls 2 lave nets from out the boot of the car. If there was a method of fishing more ancient, more basic than the putchers, then I am looking at it. Such nets do not come from tackle shops. Nigel makes them himself, the whole apparatus like a vast shovel. It is a good net, it has served him well. But there's no point in a good net, he mutters, if there are no fish to catch. Nigel's £60 lave licence permits him to catch a single salmon in a season. 1. We pick our way down the sludge of the bank, leaning heavily on the nets. Lean forward, weight on the toes, keep moving, or the mud begins to suck you downwards. At any moment, I expect Nigel to tell me that this is all some joke, the very gullibility of what a city boy will believe of country life. But then we are in the shallows, the water up to our thighs, and with a warning not to drift too far downriver, I'll be heading out to sea. Nigel sinks onto his front, his head directed downstream, and holding the net before him as a float, he sculls out into the channel. I watch him go, and then I follow. The water is warmer than I expected. We move along at quite a pace. I watch Nigel ahead of me, ferrying out into the middle of the river. It makes me think of otters. For a time, I drift on my back and watch the sky. If I pull level with Nigel, we can chat. Without him here, this would feel insane. Plenty of folk have drowned in these waters, not least those who used to work the putchers. In his 40 years of fishing, Nigel has learnt the Severn's ways and moods, although he insists only on this stretch. Take him a few miles upriver, he says, and he'd be lost. We are nearing the bridge, angling directly for the middle of the estuary now, and up ahead the water has a subtly different quality to it, and it is for this that Nigel points his net. Suddenly he stands and wades downstream, emerging from the river. By the time I reach him, he is standing up with the water around his thighs, his net unfurled, and I stand up beside him. The bridge, the older of the two, is almost directly above us, the tide whipping around its enormous stanchions. I can make out people in the cars, and from up there we must look biblical. 2 miles of water, and 2 men with ancient instruments balanced in the centre upon its surface. The way it works is this. We are on the outgoing tide, and the salmon, guided by deep flowing channels, will be pushed towards the sandbar we are walking. When they realise they are running out of river, they will turn and swim back upstream, and where they force against the river's flow, their wake or loom will give them away. At that point, we'll hustle over and scoop them up. In comparison with the delicacy of fly fishing, this feels like the use of a blunt instrument, but it is effective. Not so long ago, there was a 6-man team operating lave nets out of Lydney making a living. Those days are gone. And yet, as we make our way upriver, it is increasingly clear to me that the catching of the fish itself is not really the point. The point is to find a reason still to be here. Thanks.
Adam, thank you so much. I particularly love that in your piece, that feeling, the invisible, the ghosts of salmon past, you know, that you conjuring up the absence of the salmon as much as what is left, and perhaps even the suggestion that one day, who knows, maybe they can come back. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Beautiful,
Great.
beautiful piece. Keelan Hughes is our first piece of fiction, and I absolutely love this piece. I don't want to preempt it with anything else except to ask Keelan to read from Creep.
Thank you so much, Isabella. It's absolutely delightful to be part of this. So I'll just read the first 2 paragraphs. It's an autumnal December, 1 month into the hibernation of lesser horseshoe bats. They would breathe just once an hour, but for the balmy air troubling their sleep. Their eyelids quiver, ears twitch for the pacifying fizz and pat of first snow. Failing that, for the thawing stalactite drip of the new season. Begun already? Perhaps the cold has been and gone. Perhaps they missed it, having tucked themselves too far inside the cave's oblivion. Thea had stared out the conference window at the Pyrenees Mountains, barely confectioned in snow, trying to block out her co-panelist expounding on subglacial water flows and multi-valued sliding laws. Unable to enter a hibernate state, Thea would slip out of the conference far more easily than she will her field of research. She'll forfeit her tenure track position at Queen's, as well as a decade's worth of collaborative potential. But there were peaks beyond the window that would, with luck, be snow blanketed, where she could benumb herself for a time. She hadn't been skiing since her master's in Iceland, back when glaciers had some heft to them, though slackened and fast diminishing as the legs of a retired cyclist. Back when the archival wealth of ice was giddying. She fled the room ahead even of her own predictive computations, before hearing her co-panelists' devastating findings. She closed the door on partial answers to absolute questions. Thank you.
Keelan, thank you so much. I absolutely adored your piece, and I love the sort of, well, there's sort of mischievousness to it, I think, as well. But I love the human practicalities and also the ecological detail. When we were actually going through the routine of the fact checking, I actually challenged Keelan because I couldn't believe she described helicopters dumping snow on ski slopes where there wasn't any. I challenged her because I couldn't believe that happens, and I was absolutely wrong. And I still can't quite believe it happens. But it sort of says it all, really. Anyway, I absolutely love your piece. Thank you very much. One of the joys of editing this issue has been meeting people that I've only sort of heard of by reputation. And have been longing to meet. And one of those is Dino Martins. Dino is a hugely respected ecologist, and he runs a centre in Kenya. He's also a lecturer in ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton University. We had some wonderful conversations over the phone. It's the first time I've actually seen his face. And for often when you think of Africa, you know, it's the charismatic species, it's the elephants, it's the rhinos, it's the lions. But I'm thrilled that for this piece, Dino has taken us into the intimate realm of much, much smaller species. Dino, will you read from us from Secret Loves of Flowers?
Thank you, Izzy. And it's an honor to be able to share with you a little bit of a glimpse of the wonder, beauty, and detail of life here in the bush. I'm kneeling quietly, staying as still as possible before a mass of luxuriant white flowers at the edge of a gorge in a distant, hidden corner in the highlands of Kenya. It is 5:45 a.m. Sunrise is still some 37 minutes away. The eastern edges of the horizon are laced with saffron, and drunken crickets rasp intermittently. Larks and robin chats start warming up, and in the distance is the forlorn territorial sawing of a lonely leopard. A furtive and whirring sighing rustles through the cool, crisp air. Swiftly, it moves among the shadows, more heard than seen, a blurred suggestion of form in the blue-gray stillness before dawn. Then ever so stealthily, with proboscis unfurled, she probes the heart of her unsuspecting but patient evolutionary match and is rewarded with a milliliter's measure of nectar. A cute floral nod and it's all over. Millions of years of evolution reduced to just a millisecond of mutual pleasure and benefit. And like all naturalists who have borne witness to nature's myriad mysteries many times before, I have come to learn and have been blessed with a small discovery. For the past 10 years, I have been studying the intimate interactions between hawk moths and the flowers they pollinate. Hawk moths are an intriguing and incredible group of insects. They are fast-flying, long-lived, and feed actively from the many different kinds of flowers, a fair number of which they alone can pollinate. Despite their relatively high diversity, little is known about their actual role as pollinators, and in particular as specialized pollinators of highly adapted plants, though it is widely estimated that about 10% of all tropical flowering plant species are pollinated by hawk moths. Among naturalists, they are known as the quintessential phantoms of the dusk because they emerge to approach flowers just as darkness gathers. After hundreds of hours spent waiting to see them and many thousands of fleeting glimpses of these enigmatic creatures, I've learned to avoid looking for them on cold or misty mornings, to stay still, to move slowly, and to watch very, very closely as their flower feeds can last less than a few seconds. My journey to this particular moment of discovery on the edge of a gorge in the Kenyan highlands had in fact begun the night before. On an evening walk with the dogs, I had followed a sweet, musky perfume towards the edge of the gorge. Suddenly, the fragrant dusk is filled with sounds and shadows. Crickets strumming their wings utter chirps and whistles. A high-pitched silvery squeak, barely within the range of human hearing, punctuates the erratic course of a bat. Leaves rustle and branches creak as gentle gusts of breeze move through the forest. Pinpoints of light, courting fireflies, flash in the damp depths. The fragrance grows more powerful with each passing minute, and clustered close in the gnarled arms of a dying tree, a spray of white stars is the source of the delicious scent.
Dina, thank you. It's magical. I love it. One of the things that resonated with me about your piece, which you, apart from the beauty of those descriptions, was how your work with farmers and how often they have absolutely no understanding of the importance of and the role of pollinating insects. And I just wish we'd known you 20 years ago and you could have enlightened us too, and we'd have saved a lot of pesticides. But thank you so much for your lovely, delightful, very light piece. Beautiful. Zoe Tryon is a friend of mine and an amazing activist for peoples in the Amazon. She spent a lot of time living there. And when I was putting the piece together and commissioning, I very much wanted to have a viewpoint of someone who was living in the Amazon and to understand how they felt about what was happening. So I rang Zoe, and as luck would have it, she had a great friend of hers, Minari Ishigria, who was staying with her at the time. He'd come over from Ecuador. He's a shaman, a tribesman from the Ecuadorian rainforest, and he was over here doing presentations about the Amazon and the plight of his people. So Zoe very kindly and Minari agreed to conduct an interview. And it went through a very convoluted process of Zoe interviewing him in Spanish and difficult Sapara words that she had to ask him to expand on and translate. And then it went through translation and with an official translator who didn't quite get the concepts, and Zoe had to keep going back to Minari, who by then was in Ecuador. And this amazing sort of piece began to emerge, and I began to realize how important it is that we have gatekeepers, as it were, like Minari and like Zoe, who can put one foot in another culture's world and meet them halfway to be able to express a completely different way of looking at the world. So Zoe, will you read for us from Minari's wonderful piece?
Yes, thank you, Izzy. The big question I've always had was, where do we come from? How did we appear here in this world? In my dream, I had a vision that my father picked me up and told me, I'm going to take you to where the world disappears. And we went backwards and backwards up into space, and there was nothing. And from there, he made us listen to lots of stories. And someone said, it is possible that on this planet, there can be life. And I looked, but it was invisible and it couldn't be seen. It was just an idea. Then Earth fell like a clap of thunder. And that clap of thunder was so strong that it split something, and sand and water appeared and the Earth started to form. Yes, that is how the Earth was formed, but that happened many years ago. And then a place of wisdom and knowledge appeared. And my father used to say that the people who reach that place are the people who think about the world, about how life started, or how the Earth was formed. And we saw that it was a difficult space to get to. It is the jungle of Amazonia. And my father says that's why all we who live here in the forest can truly think. We have this wisdom about the earth, about the forest, because this space for thinking exists, and it is here in the physical world. When we look at the natural world, we see the trees standing there, the insects flying, the birds, the animals, the rivers. And if we can see that same reality from the spiritual world, we can see all these things as people, like us. They walk about, they move, we can converse with them, with the insects, with the plants, with the water, with the air that we breathe. It's a person. We know many, many things. And I have told you that we have a deep understanding about medicinal plants, about nature, about many different worlds outside of this one. And we know how to connect with these different worlds, with the world of nature and the world of spirits. We have always hidden and protected this knowledge, but now we have decided to share this with other cultures, to invite friends into our territory and teach them so that they can understand us and learn not to destroy nature. Many other cultures do not understand how to do this. So when we have visitors to our territory, the first thing we do is a limpia, or ritual cleansing. We use medicinal plants, tirikaspi and jungle tobacco, and using these plants, we open a window for them to connect with nature and with the spiritual world. These plants neutralize and clean the contamination and the smell of the city and the contaminated thinking, so that they can be connected to the scent of the forest. Once they are balanced, the people can begin to recognize nature, and it can begin to communicate with them. And then when they sleep that night, they will begin to dream, and in the morning, we will ask them about their dreams and help them to understand the messages that nature is giving to them. So many people ask me how we can connect with nature, and this is how we answer. It is in our dreams, in our visions, the nature spirits teach us.
So thank you, that's wonderful. I think Minari's words are just pure poetry, and what I'm overwhelmed by is his, above all, is his sort of incredible generosity of spirit. That there he is with the people now reduced to just hundreds from 200,000 was it at the turn of the century, and only 3 people speaking the native language, and yet on the verge of cultural elimination, disappearance. He is doing everything to try and explain what he knows. So it's amazing. Thank you so much. Next up is Samantha Subramanian with a wonderful piece on vultures. Not a species that many consider to be charismatic or endearing, but they play a vital role in ecology and in culture too. Samantha, will you read for us from vultures?
Thank you. Yes. The only thing you have to know before I start is SAVE. The acronym is a Vulture Conservation Consortium in India. The first few months of 2020 were a torrid time for SAVE's breeding centers. The 4 facilities are spread across India's northern half. One in the state of Haryana, not far from Delhi. One in the state of Madhya Pradesh in India's solar plexus, and 2 in the eastern states of Assam and West Bengal. During the COVID-19 pandemic, every center found itself in a red zone, a coronavirus hotspot that was strictly battened down. Travel was practically out of the question, and boundaries between districts were sealed. In the breeding center in Haryana, near the town of Pinjore, Vibhu Prakash needs 100 goats a day to feed his 360 vultures. Ordinarily, Prakash buys old, infirm goats, since vultures prefer lean meat to fatty meat, but his usual markets were shut, and the only goats he managed to find during the pandemic had been plumped up on farms. Still, they had to suffice. To source even these goats with any regularity, Prakash had to work until he wilted. Our supplier went out to get them from Rajasthan or other states, he said. Then the cops wouldn't let him travel, so we had to get him passes from the government. In late May, even as the pandemic burned on, a cyclone hit West Bengal, flattening electricity and telephone lines. The breeding center in Rajabhat Khawa, located in a wildlife park near the border with Bhutan, lost power. In addition to figuring out meals for its vultures, the staff had to find diesel for their generators, not just to switch on the lights and charge the mobile phones, but also to electrify the fence that keeps the park's elephants out. Of the 4 centers, the Pinjore Center is the oldest. It was founded in 2001 as a partnership between the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, the Bombay Natural History Society, and the state government. Formally, it is called the Jatayu Conservation Breeding Center, a throwback to the Ramayana. Jatayu, the most renowned vulture in Hindu myth, is Sampati's younger brother, and his heroism ends in spectacular tragedy. When Ravana first kidnaps Sita, Jatayu flies to her rescue and attacks the demon king's chariot. In a mid-air battle, Ravana slices off Jatayu's wings, and the grand bird plummets to his death. Far south of Pinjore, on a rocky hilltop in the state of Kerala, a sculptor has built a colossal concrete statue of Jatayu, where he's said to have fallen to earth. The statue is ludicrously literal, but also strangely moving. Its head might resemble the logo of a fried chicken chain, but on one side of its body has been sheared off. Its remaining wing unfurls to the side, and its sole talon claws the air. Jatayu isn't dead yet, but he is already helpless and beyond preservation. Thank you.
So that's absolutely, it's a fascinating, fascinating piece. I loved it. Thank you so much. Amy Leach's writing is almost impossible to pin down. I think she describes it as creative nonfiction. We had several pieces to choose from for this issue, and I found it almost impossible to decide on one. But in the end, we decided to go for O Latitudo. So I'd love you to hear from Amy's piece.
Thank you, Isabella. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I loved being young, says the chorus in Heracles, written around 420 BC. And to this day, people are still chorusing about how they loved being young, insisting that someday young people too will have loved being young. Nobody goes up to old people and says, I loved being old. Or if they do, you can't hear them or see them. I know of a bear who didn't love everything about being young, the bear who his first winter built a den for himself, but it wasn't big enough. So all winter he hibernated with his bottom sticking out. Platypuses could say to us, I loved being young, since compared to platypuses, humans are whippersnappers. Platypuses may condescend to us, but we must not condescend to them. If we want to condescend to somebody, we can condescend to Petunia, Petunia is a ridiculously young flower, having been cultivated in the 19th century. Petunia's parents are wild and old and Argentinian. But though she is young and inexperienced, I have seen Petunia rallying after a hailstorm, putting herself back together. I imagine if a supervolcano a little south of here erupted, there would be the insouciant Petunia afterwards, shaking the ash off her purple. Breezing around over a supervolcano, the dragonflies of Yellowstone are so insouciant, you might think they were super young. However, they are 300 million years old, and over that time, they've seen plenty of supervolcanoes erupt. Maybe that's why their heads are all eyeballs. Anyway, rather than organizing a super bucket brigade in preparation for another super eruption, the flame skimmer dragonflies, the cherry-faced meadowhawks, and mountain emeralds are zooming backwards and forwards, zooming up and down, and zooming in place. They possess the insouciance of the old. Thank you.
Anyway, I love your work. I'm longing to read more of your work. I love the energy and the endless fun and playfulness of it. And always with something fresh and a new perspective. Thank you so much. Tim Dee is a wonderful ornithologist and nature writer in his own right. And here he's introducing for us the incredible work of Xavi Bou, whose image is on the cover of this issue, and who has also done our second photo essay. Tim, will you tell us about Xavi's work?
Thank you very much, Izzy. I hope I can try to do some screen sharing in a minute. Are you seeing a picture of this picture? No, maybe not. I'm just going to give it one more go. I'm sorry.
We can see half of it.
Yeah, I'm just, thank you. Let me just try and move them across. How does that look?
Ah, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Let me go. So each of Xavi Bou's photographs, remarkable photographs like this extraordinary headdress or headache of starlings leaving a pre-roost tree, show actual birds undertaking actual journeys. And all the images in Granta reveal what we might call wing work, how every species flies in its own way. No scientific photography or technical illustration that I know of has rendered bird locomotion as legible as these. No artistic treatment of the same has been so literally built from the real world. I'll show you another picture. Most of these images record roughly 20 seconds of flying time. This is a single fulmar in flight in Iceland. Each flight is rendered as a line, thick or thin, or curved or straight, depending on how the bird flies. The line is a capture of a flight path and is made from a thread of snapshots of the moving bird, harvested from a dozen or more frames and collaged into one. Wing beats are first stopped, as it were, and then reanimated. The whole movie is condensed into one photograph. No bird could ever be seen by our naked eye as Xavi Bou shows it, but every flying bird actually moves in that way. Paradoxically, his artfulness increases each picture's truthfulness. Here, 3 yellow-legged gulls and 4 white storks circle together up a column of rising air. Their flight paths make up the 7 inky lines that alone mark this print. Even as calligraphy, the bird's distinctive jizz is apparent, the quintessence of every species. We might also calculate energy spend. It takes, to my count, 26 flaps for a yellow-legged gull to rise as far as one soaring movement or lift a white stork. In the 1940s, during the early years of radar, systems operators regularly reported inexplicable blooms and blurs of light moving across their screens. They called them angels. Only later, in peacetime, were these identified as ordinary things and everyday occurrences. birds flocking in flight. Many grey-black angels are to be seen for real in Shabibu's photographs. These are swallows in Yellowstone. Icarus would have pored over these photos and have learned from them. So might Amelia Earhart, or Leonardo da Vinci, or David Lack, the radar operator turned ornithologist, or even the Birdman of Alcatraz. Thanks.
Tim, they're so beautiful, those images. And I have actually tested some ornithologists or birders, shown them the images, and I'm sure, Tim, you'd have absolutely no trouble, but quite often they can identify what the birds are. And I wish I had that skill, but it's amazing. They're beautiful, beautiful images. Thank you very much. I was so excited to be introduced to Cal Finn's work by Granta. I originally commissioned her to write about the resurgence of wolves in Europe, but then COVID happened and she couldn't travel. So instead chose to write about wolves in Britain. And I think it's just one of those incidents when force of circumstance, the kind of constraints, actually produced something that was conjured up something that was even more interesting and more intriguing than the original idea. I think that's what's happened here. So Cal, will you read for us from The Wolf at the Door?
Thank you, Izzy. Yes. Yes, we talk a little bit in the piece about how wolves have been flooding back into Europe, partly thanks to farmland abandonment. And it's different here in the UK because if we're going to have wolves, we're going to have to make a decision to bring them back, to reintroduce them. So I'll read a short section. What could it cost us, this risk aversion? While we've been wringing our hands over a few dozen beavers, refusing even to countenance the reintroduction of lynx, Europe has been rewilding of its own accord. But it has been years since we have come face to face with apex predators in our own country. If our fear was a landscape, it would be a prairie, a great plain. The threats we face now are constructions of our own devising. Listen, I'm a woman. I know of men. I have walked city streets with keys pressed between my fingers. I've wrenched my wrist from a strong grip, stepped from a moving vehicle as it swung off the road, confronted strangers under streetlights rather than leading them to my door. But what has stayed with me is those other times and other places. That night I woke to hear the breathing of an animal, large and close at hand, through the canvas of my tent. Or that time in bear country I smelt a bestial stench, so strong the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and my horse spun and danced beneath me, flaring its nostrils and rolling its eyes. This is a different plane of fear, a fire of the body, a fear without reason. I say without reason, and this is true in both senses of the term, for our fear of wolves is out of all proportion to the danger they pose us. Wolves very rarely attack humans, even actively avoid us. One might live a lifetime in the woods with a pack of wolves for neighbors and never see a single one. When thinking of reintroductions, we must be circumspect, realistic. The risk of wolf attack is small, tiny even. Still, it is not zero. Thank you.
Cal, thank you so much. When I read your piece, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. You really feel the wolf's presence in Britain all those centuries ago. But and also maybe how amazing wouldn't it be if we could have them again? Long way down the road, I guess. But thank you, really, really wonderful piece. Rebecca Priestley joins us from New Zealand. So another one, thank you so much for getting up at the crack of dawn. She's another of those diamonds of a true scientist who can actually communicate and incredibly beautifully and expressively and powerfully. She's written about her work in the field in a wonderful book called 15 Million Years in Antarctica. And for this issue, while in lockdown in her hometown in New Zealand, she reflects on sea level rises. Rebecca, will you read for us from Prepare to be Kind?
Yep. Thanks, Isabella. This photograph behind me relates to this piece that I'm reading now. When I arrived just past midday, the esplanade was busy, or what passed for busy under this new normal, with dog walkers, bikers, and parents with prams. I parked and scurried across the road, avoiding a pile of slimy brown kelp and sand, and leaned over the sea wall. The beach was gone. On the other side of the low concrete wall, the water swirled over tussock-covered dunes, submerging the sands with each incoming wave and exposing the golden grasses as the water retreated. It was unrecognizable. At the western end of the bay, where the coastline curved towards the hills, the water flowed in multiple directions as the waves swept in from the south, bounced off the seawall and traveled east to intersect with the next set of southerly waves. I started to walk around the curve of the bay, stepping carefully on the sandy footpath, popping kelp bubbles and trying not to slip while I immersed myself in the roar of the waves, the smell of the sea and kelp, the squawk of an oyster catcher. As I walked, I looked through the gaps between a row of beachfront houses. One had a launch on a trailer in the driveway, another a kayak on the lawn. Useful. I found myself standing with an older woman and a couple with a camera looking past a wooden house where waves were surging across a stone wall and into its yard. "Are you a reporter?" asked the man with a nod at my notebook and pen. "I'm a writer," I replied. "I'm writing about sea level rise." "Ah," he nodded. "Good thing the land keeps rising." 1855, he added with a raise of his eyebrows. He was right, but he was also wrong. In 1855, a magnitude 8.2 earthquake hit the Wellington and Wairarapa regions. It lifted the shoreline by up to 1 meter, creating the raised wave-cut platform that our coastal roads now followed, and drained the swampy isthmus that was now home to more than 5,000 people. Further east, the uplift reached 6 meters. Earthquakes like this, though, work against a long-term slow subsidence of about 2 millimeters a year. Other parts of New Zealand are subsiding by up to 4 millimeters a year. This is another reason why projecting sea level rise is complicated. Projections of 40 centimeters, 1 meter, 2 meters or more are global averages, but sea level rise will differ from place to place. New Zealand is prone to earthquakes, which can uplift significant stretches of coast, but earthquakes are unpredictable. They aren't something we can rely on to solve sea level rise. High tide had passed and the beach was re-emerging. I walked to my car, head down, reading a news article on my phone. A person swept out to sea that morning had been recovered with moderate injuries, and a police spokeswoman was telling locals, "Do not come down to take pictures or just to take a look." A police car drove slowly past, flashing its hazard lights. Sprung. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And can I just say, because it is relevant to your piece, that I am so envious of you having Jacinda Ardern as your Prime Minister. Maybe we shouldn't even go there. But it's a brilliant piece. Thank you so much. Nate Duke is one of our 2 poets for this issue, and he joins us from the States. With no more to say, really, could you please read your wonderful poem, Projects Not Realized, for us?
Thank you. Projects Not Realized. Installation artists Christo and Jean-Claude meant to cover miles of Arkansas headwaters in silver canopies. Their axiomatic structure would have dimmed sunlight in riparian biomes, disrupted trout migrations, blocked the route of wildlife to a high prairie's only water source, eroded banks in parallel construction. The list swells. In an alternate present, white rapids fade as I float down the gorge on a blue plastic raft. And in the noon dark, I miss my landing, a boulder with a trailblaze and cairn on the beach. I'd meant to camp there. With parachute cord and tarp enough for shelter, I'd rest after the day's rowing till the sunset melted on a lip of canyon. Instead, I drift blind past that beach under one more of the planet's smoke carpets. A parched cow elk the artists didn't consult, practiced as she was, at scaling the canyon in a switchback of leaps, lands on a canopy, rips its moorings, then falls to the river in a silver gray sack. I scull my raft across the channel toward the Sky Museum that's opened now above her grave, and pretend I'm the docent, addressing tours of foam with a drenched oar brandished at the sun. Thank you.
Nate, thank you so much. I've always wondered about Christo wrapping things up that were already so beautiful. This is just a real poem. I think it's a wonderful analogy for our relationship with nature. Thank you so much. Ken Thompson's book, Where Do Camels Belong, was a complete revelation to me. I've never quite looked at the world the same way again. And it's lifted a huge burden of anxiety from my shoulders. So I hope his piece, Aliens and Us, will do the same for readers of Granta.
Thank you, Izzy. The overwhelming majority of professional biologists and conservationists have strong and rigid opinions about aliens and natives. Natives, that's animals and plants that evolved where they live now or spread there without human assistance, belong, and thus merit our concern and, if necessary, our care. Aliens, introduced by humans, even if in the relatively remote past, do not belong, and thus deserve only indifference at best or active persecution. I began my career feeling the same way, but later as a university ecologist, I began to look a bit more objectively at the published research on alien species. And I soon realized that much of it was, if not positively dishonest, at least being economical with the truth. In fact, pretending that the native alien dichotomy has much practical value is both lazy and out of date. Lazy because conservation is all about values, but there's surprisingly little debate about what those values are. Aliens are nasty, natives are nice has been one of the very few things everyone thought they could agree on without having to think too hard. So a lot of practical conservation has involved digging up, poisoning, burning, or shooting alien plants and animals. This military-industrial approach has rarely been successful and has often simply created suitable conditions for the establishment of yet more aliens. Losing sleep over aliens is out of date because trying to control or eradicate alien species frequently stems from a yearning to return to a pristine alien-free state that was often a romantic illusion anyway. Today's wildlife managers, like it or not, have to recognize that the natural systems of the past have gone forever, thanks to climate change, pollution, and urbanization, among other things. It can't be much of a surprise when you stop and think about it, that in the face of such pressures, many natives are no longer the best adapted species in any particular spot. And conservation of a functioning countryside in the face of climate change may even require introducing aliens, particularly trees from warmer climates, to mitigate the failure of our native trees to respond quickly to rising temperatures and changing weather patterns. Much of the modern natural world now consists of a mixture of long-term residents and new arrivals, and ecosystems are emerging that never existed before, often living in climates that never existed before either. Restoring such ecosystems to some rightful historical state is no longer possible, even in theory. So we should stop trying, embrace such novel ecosystems, and determine to get the best out of them for humanity and for the planet. Thank you.
Ken, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm absolutely dying to read Jessie Greengrass's new novel, which is coming out in April next year. I read 3 extracts of it for this issue, and I can hardly contain myself wanting to know what happens. So here's Jessie to read from The High House.
Thank you. So I suppose the only thing that you need to know is that this novel and this section of the novel is set in a world, a near future, in which I guess none of the people that have spoken tonight have been listened to. I left school for good at lunchtime on the day I turned 18. I walked home. The house was empty. I had no plans either for the afternoon or for the time beyond it. my life, which stretched empty ahead, or didn't. It was becoming clear to everyone now that things were getting worse. The winter before, half of Gloucestershire had been flooded, and the waters, refusing to recede, had made a new fen, covering homes and fields, roads and schools. In York, the river had burst its banks and the city centre was gone, walls which had stood for nearly 2 millennia washed halfway down to Hull. People didn't say these places were gone. They didn't say that there were families living in caravans and service stations all along the M5, lined up in the car parks with volunteers running aid stations out of the garage forecourts. People said, they must have known their homes were vulnerable. We were protected by our houses and our educations and our high street shopping centres. We had the habit of luck and power and couldn't understand that they were not our right. We saw that the situation was bad elsewhere, but surely something would work out, because didn't it always for us? We were paralysed, unable to plan either for a future in which all was well or one in which it wasn't. I'm not going back, I said to Father when he came home from work because the school had called to tell him I had left. What will you do instead, he asked, and I shrugged one shoulder up and slid my eyes away. There had been daffodils in the park at Christmas. The coast path had been redrawn at 6 different places over the last 3 years. I have to go and pick up Paulie from nursery, I said, unless you're going to do it. And I walked down the road to where Paulie was waiting, standing at the gate in his coat and hat and mittens. That evening, Francesca came home. I don't know where she had been, which of the many places, savaged by weather, that might have needed her expertise and her anger, but she smelled of mould and filthy water and she was exhausted. She looked thin. After Paulie was in bed, I sat with her and Father at the kitchen table. What will you do, Father asked me again, and Francesca said, that's a pretty stupid question under the circumstances. Father let his breath hiss out between his teeth. He said, we can't just give up on everything. No, Francesca looked at me, of course. But anyway, she said, we need you to look after Paulie. And then I knew how absolutely she had given up herself. Later, unable to sleep, I went downstairs to fetch a book, and, standing in the hall, I heard them talking, Father and Francesca together. The door was slightly open, and I watched them through the crack it made. They were still sitting at the kitchen table just as I had left them, side by side, facing my empty chair. Father asked, are you so sure? Yes, Francesca replied, I am. I think I am. We always knew a tipping point would come. It's a surprise, really, that it's taken so long. You could stop, Father said. If there's no point, we could stay together for a while at least. Cara is unhappy. Paul too, probably, although I agree it's harder to tell. They were silent for a long time then, and I stood very still in the corridor and thought of Paulie, the way his body twitched in his sleep, the tense look he got when Francesca was there, and how it was not hard at all for me to tell if he was happy or not. The next morning when I went downstairs, Father was in the kitchen drinking coffee and Francesca was gone. She had an early flight, he told me. She said to say goodbye. To me, I asked, or to Paulie?
Jessie, thank you. Wonderful. Well, finally, I am so honoured and thrilled to have Sheila Watt-Cloutier's piece for this issue. Sheila is an award-winning Inuit activist, and she's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and her book, The Right to be Cold, is an extraordinary testimony of what's happening to now in the Arctic and to the indigenous peoples there, and to their knowledge. And what hopefully, if we listen, what their role can be in the future. I felt it was only right that for Second Nature, Sheila should have the last word. I hope the technology is working. She was dropping out a little bit earlier on. Sheila, could you read for us from your piece?
Sorry, I almost forgot to take off the mute here.
Great.
I speak my mother tongue, Inuktitut, just to say thank you. And here I go. I've got to read from my iPhone, so hopefully this will flow. So, despite the excessive damage done to Inuit society and culture, when we move from the land into the villages, there is, in most of these settlements, an essential core of families instinctively committed to maintaining our traditions. Individual members of these families, even while living within the semi-urban settings, strive to relate to the land and its resources in the same respectful way that sustained us prior to the move. They acquire an intimate knowledge of their local area and the various animal species it supports. And the men employ many of the same hunting skills used in former times, while the women prepare and soften the skins of seals and caribou for the clothing they make for themselves and their hunters, using techniques, patterns, and stitches handed down by an endless succession of mothers, aunts, and grandmothers. And most importantly, members of these families embody the essential philosophies and understandings of the land and the animals that enabled us to thrive over countless generations before we suffered the consequences of European contact. In a real and substantial sense, such Inuit keep the vital flame of our culture alive. They are an irreplaceable resource in both practical and intellectual ways, and they need and deserve every possible means of support. But beyond the challenges, this already vulnerable way of being endures in the face of the Arctic's rapidly increasing urbanization and globalization. There is another imminent threat, no less insidious. That, unless checked, will end forever our unique attachment to the land and its life-giving resources. Climate change. Dramatic climate change caused by greenhouse gases has left no feature of our Arctic landscape, seascape, or way of life untouched. And climate change now threatens our very culture, our ability to live off the land and eat our country foods. Nowhere else in the world are ice and snow so essential to transportation and mobility. And yet the snow and ice coverings over which we access our traditional foods are becoming more and more unreliable and therefore unsafe, leaving our hunters more prone than ever to breaking through unexpectedly thin ice or being swept out to sea when that floe ice platform on which they're hunting breaks off from the land, fast ice. Additionally, climate change is affecting the migration patterns and routes of the animals we rely upon. And this means that our hunters have to travel further, often over unsafe and unfamiliar trails, to access our country food. So when we no longer count on our vital, long-established travel routes and can no longer find the animals where they should be, the matter immediately becomes an issue of safety and security at several levels. With less traditional foods available, many families are forced to shift away from our traditional food to a far less healthy diet shipped from the south, and consisting mainly of processed foods crammed with sugar, salt, and carbohydrates. It is no surprise that in Canada, our Arctic communities are experiencing rapidly rising rates of diabetes and other food-related illnesses, trends that will only continue as we move away from a country food diet. And there you have it.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Isabella Tree, for not only hosting this evening's event so beautifully, but for bringing all these extraordinary writers together. For most of us who haven't left our homes, or barely left our homes all year, having this opportunity for the natural world from every corner of the globe brought to us has been such a treat. Before I press the end button, though, I want to encourage everybody to go to granta.com, our website, where they can not only find lots more excellent content, stories, poetry, photography, but also where you can buy this beautiful, beautiful issue of the magazine. Also, we have posted the special offers for subscriptions on the chat box. It's a wonderful thing to have a subscription for Granta, and it also, may I remind you all, makes for a very good Christmas present, because here perhaps better than ever. So while we can't do a round of applause that you all thoroughly deserve, can I just say, from our corners of the globe to your corners of the globe, thank you so much. I'm sure everyone is going to now just do a little clap for themselves. I'm going to press the end button now. Good night.